the Inner Game podcast, brought to you by the Science of Excellence, presented by Rob Hume, the leading elite athlete mental performance coach. Unleash your power.
Boom! So, welcome onto the Inner Game podcast. Ben Rowlings coming onto the show today. We have somebody with a wealth of sporting experience in not just athletics, but I believe that your sporting journey kind of began in a different sport. But we've got someone who's been to both the Brazil Paralympics, Tokyo Olympics. Ben is the 5,000 meter world record holder, the 800 and 1,500 meter European record holder. He's got British records at 200, 400, 800, 1,500, 5K, and he's a double silver medalist in the Europeans in the 400 and 800. So we've got a guy who's certainly smashing down the boundaries and going for it in sport. So thanks a lot, Ben, for coming on the show and giving up your time.
Thank you for having me. It's a bit of a mouthful when you read it off like that.
Yeah, I bet sometimes, you athletes, you're so kind of busy just doing what you do that often maybe you don't actually spend some time looking back going, gosh, have I actually done all this stuff, Yeah,
I guess it's one of those things that I'll probably look back on when I'm old and kind of decrepit and go, oh, that was pretty cool to do. But yeah, in the moment, it's always been a kind of, that's great. Right now, what's next? It's never been, you never get more than a kind of couple of days, maybe a week to kind of take it all in and kind of soak it up.
Yeah. So if it's okay with you, I'd like to rewind time and just talk about how things started for you in sport. Because I think I have read that, obviously, where you're kind of applying your trade now is within athletics, but I think it started in swimming. Was that the beginning of sport for you, or how did your journey into sport begin? What was it that kicked things off for you?
So I've always been really sporty. It's something that I kind of always wanted to do. I've got a little brother. He's completely able-bodied. So anything that he was able to do, I wanted to try and do. Usually not as successfully. And then I went through mainstream schools as a kid. So all my mates wanted to play football when I was in kind of primary schools and all the way through. And I wanted to join in. I was rubbish because obviously I can't really run or kind of stand up too stably. But they put me in goal because if I fell one way, I had a chance of stopping it. So yeah, I've always been quite sporty. So it was just kind of a route in. And then in secondary school, I had a really, really supportive PE teacher, Mr. Bell, who kind of showed me that I could do whatever I wanted to in sport. If I wanted to give anything a crack in PE, he'd find a way of including me. And then he kind of stumbled across parasport and took me to a couple of kind of ID days for swimming originally. And I kind of got stuck in with that. I started in my local club. I was the only disabled swimmer in that local club, so it was quite nice just to have a load of able-bodied swimmers around me that kind of pull me through a little bit. I'm a very competitive person, so I don't like getting beaten too often. So it was a little bit humbling to begin with. I swam for a few years, probably from like the age of year 7 to year 10. But then I found out I was allergic to chlorine.
Whoa, right.
So, yeah, nothing major. It just kind of blocked at my nose and kind of made it a bit difficult kind of straight afterwards. But when you're getting up to swim before school and then trying to do a full day and then doing it again, it was a lot. So I had to kind of find something else, and I kind of went to my PE teacher one day. I was like, I want to find a different sport, and there was a kind of come and try me day in my local area, which had a load of different sports there and different para sports there that I can go and try. And he was just like, look, we can get a PE teacher to come along with you if you'd like to go. So I jumped at that chance, and just kind of snowballed from there. I went to this day, and it was in a sports hall at a leisure centre. And there was racing wheelchairs on kind of indoor trainers. I was like, they look cool. But the guy that was kind of leading the athletics thing wanted to kind of broaden it a little bit and try and get me into throws and get me into everything else. He was like, come and try a talent identification day in Loughborough and you can have a proper go at everything with a bit more space. I went along to that a couple of months later and saw the race chairs like on an athletics track and saw people going around. I was like, stuff throwing. I don't want to sit there throwing all day. Jumped in a race chair and I was rubbish for years and years and years. I was useless. But it gave me that fix that I got when I was swimming. It gave me that kind of competitive, like, I could really see myself doing this. And I think my first race was the London Mini Marathon 4 months after I started. That's the last 5K of the marathon course that's open to juniors. And it took me, I can't remember what my first time was, but it was a long time. It took me, it was painful going up some of those hills. But I got the bug, and it's been under my skin ever since. And I gradually got quicker, and slowly that started to open up a lot more doors in terms of competitions and traveling, and eventually a GB vest in 2014. So that was 3-4 years after I started. First GB vest at the Europeans in Swansea. Went there and won a bronze medal in the 800 meters. And it's just kind of been a bit of a snowball since then.
What a fantastic story. That obviously you've had the initiative there to go and seek sport out for yourself. You know, so sometimes for some people, kind of sport lands on their lap. Almost they fall into it in some way, but it was your internal drive of I want to go and have sport in my life. I want to go find something that I can get my stick my teeth into and go for it. And having those talent ID days were obviously really beneficial to help getting you started, weren't they?
Yeah, I think I started at a great time as well, because it was kind of the back end of 2011 when I first jumped into a race chair. So you got all the hype of London 2012 coming up, people were kind of building for that. There was all this kind of TV promotion of Paralympic sport. So I kind of just joined it at the right time. I kind of rode that wave and kind of got into all the opportunities I could off the back of it. Like, I went to go watch London 2012 as a spectator. I got to see some of the best wheelchair races in the world race there. I was like, this is where I want to be. Like, this is the sport that I want to be in. Like, 80,000 people in the stadium. It was kind of unheard of with an athletics event before.
Yeah.
I got the bug from there. I kind of rode that wave as long as I could. And then, I think it was a mixture of good timing and, a bit of driving determination from my point of view.
Yeah. Who were your, if you had any, who were your sporting idols and heroes when you were growing up? Were they Paralympians? Were they Olympians? Were they people outside of the Olympic sports? Who were the people or person who kind of motivated and inspired you?
So I think before I kind of stumbled into parasport, every kid wants to be a footballer, and I was no different. I'm a big Liverpool fan, so I wanted to be Steven Gerrard. That was my kind of first kind of sporting idol as a kid. And then as I went through secondary school, I thought, rugby's quite cool. You see people run into each other. So then it was like the 2003 World Cup team. You kind of still get the dregs of that to kind of your Johnny Wilkinsons and things like that. And it wasn't probably until I went to go watch London 2012 where you saw people like Hannah Cockcroft and Dave Weir win their gold medals that you think, actually, there's idols that I want to be like within wheelchair racing, within parasport. Before, I'd always just kind of looked at able-bodied sport as being the pinnacle, until I kind of went to go watch 2012 as a fan, and then I thought, actually, I want to be them. I want to be winning gold medals at Paralympic Games. So that's where it kind of stemmed from there.
I went to the Olympics, but wasn't able to go to the Paralympics, unfortunately. But my recollection of the Paralympics was that it was just a real groundbreaking moment, really, where our country especially just really got behind Paralympic sport, that in a way that no other country, no other nation had ever done before, and it really seemed to shine a spotlight, on Paralympics. And do you feel that is, obviously you were able to get to the level where you've gone to and been to the Rio and then Tokyo. Obviously, I'd imagine the Tokyo one might have been a bit different, with the pandemic stuff. But how has that momentum continued since then in your eyes? Has it raised the profile of Paralympic sport, do you think?
I think London 2012 smashed the profile of Paralympic sport. It brought it to a new level that no kind of country did beforehand, and no country's kind of done since. It's kind of, in my view, it's stagnated a wee bit from where it was in 2012. Everyone wants to get on board in an Olympic year because it's an Olympic year, and then that's the big sporting focus. But I think people sometimes forget that Paralympic sport goes on in a World Championships, in the European Championships, outside of that kind of Paralympic Games year. I think Tokyo would have done an amazing job in raising that level back up. I think as a country, Japan bought into the Paralympic movement really well.
Yeah.
Tickets sold out really, really quickly for that. So it was a real shame we couldn't see what Japan could do in terms of promotion for Paralympic Games. But I think in terms of where I've seen the development, I've seen nothing like the kind of impact London 2012 had on Paralympic sport in the games in Rio or kind of the games in Tokyo. So I think there's still a lot of work to be done to raise the profile of athletes, to raise the profile of sports, to raise the profile of disability in general and show that it's a positive thing. I think that was the big kind of changing point in London 2012. Is disability went from being a kind of, it's a participation thing where people turn up and everyone gets a medal, to Paralympic sports cutthroat, it's elite sport, and they showed disabled athletes as athletes instead of disabled people.
Yeah.
I think that was the big kind of emphasis shift with London 2012. I don't really think that's been matched as consistently in the last two games.
Yeah. Just, I've had another guest on the show who is a Paralympic cyclist, and he was mentioning to me how I'm not sure which big event it is, but up in Glasgow, they're trying to bring, is it the World Championships or something like that, where they're really trying to integrate the Olympic and Paralympic events all as one competition. Which event I might be talking about there?
No, I don't. But the one thing that kind of irritates me a little bit with that is when you integrate able-bodied and Paralympic events, the able-bodied events are always going to take priority. So then you only get a certain selection of Paralympic events, and they tend to be the certain selection that are very aesthetically pleasing to the people that put it on.
Right.
So take an event like that, you won't have the same breadth of competition as you would have at a Paralympic only event, because there's scheduling space, but they'll still cram all the able-bodied events in. So we're still kind of shoehorned into that, and they'll cherry pick certain classifications, certain events to kind of suit the narrative that they want to paint.
I see.
When something like a Paralympic Games, because it's disability only, you get the whole breadth of Paralympic sport. You get all the ranges of disabilities from very impaired to kind of very mild impaired. So you get to see the whole spectrum of what disability sport is, instead of trying to shoehorn it into an able-bodied competition. I think there's place for it, especially domestically with parallel success meets and kind of inclusive training groups and things. But in terms of elite sport, I think there should still be a separation between Paralympic and Olympic sport. I think the promotion of Paralympic sport just needs to be upped. I think the media coverage on it, corporate companies just need to grasp it more and kind of really push it more into the mainstream instead of doing it once every 4 years.
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear you say that. I wasn't sure. How you Paralympians felt about it, but it's certainly, I can certainly see how, as you say, the media does a very good job of selecting the narrative, and then people think just because that's what's on TV, that is what it is. Yeah. And that's never the case. The TV media do a fantastic job of controlling a narrative to fit what they want it to be, which as you say so poignantly, that isn't what Paralympic sport necessarily is. It's somebody's version of what they think that it is and want it to be and become. So yeah, I can certainly see how you feel that the Paralympic having been its own event in its own right is the more effective way of celebrating what you're all doing and what you're striving to do.
Yeah, and I think it's just about pushing that Paralympic movement into mainstream pop culture and mainstream kind of sporting culture. We did it really well in 2012. We didn't do it as well in Rio, and because of COVID, for whatever reason, it didn't catch on in the same way in Tokyo. Yeah. But I think there's definitely the space there. People love sport. Britain is a sport-mad country.
Yeah.
I think how the Paralympics is presented to the kind of general population, we saw in London, they buy into it. The general public love Paralympic sport. It's about being able to market in the right place to get it there consistently, and then that will have a knock-on effect on kind of participation levels at grassroots, which then means more people then go into the performance side of the sport because you've got a bigger talent pool. Yeah. And then that helps Paralympic sport in total because you're getting better quality athletes who wouldn't have necessarily found Paralympic sport coming into it. Yeah. I think it has a massive kind of domino effect just having that little bit of extra exposure.
Yeah, that makes sense. In terms of you yourself, then, what's been your most defining moment in sport, or maybe it's even outside of sport? Have you had a moment which has happened kind of, in your life or outside, or either in sport or outside of sport, which really kind of shifted things in some way, your perspective or your momentum or your motivation and drive to do what you're doing? Have you ever had something like this in your life where that happened?
Yeah, and I think it was in sport, and it was a really crap situation. So I'd gone to the World Championships in 2017. I'd pushed really well that year. I'd broken the European record in the 800 meters, the European record in the 4. I'd done really well in kind of Grand Prix meets in Switzerland. I was in amazing shape, and it was a home World Championships in London, and it was the 800 meter final, and I got myself to a really good place. I was leading coming into the last 250 meters, leading as I came into the last 100. I could see the finish line, and I thought to myself, I'm going to win a World Championships, and I could see the line. And just as I thought that, 4 guys came off the side of me. Whoa. And just went 1, 2, 3, and that finish line just went further and further and further away. And I think there was 20,000 people in the Olympic Stadium at that point. I'd just seen one of my best friends win her 10th World Championships, and I crossed that line, and I've never been at a lower point in terms of sport because I had everything I'd ever dreamed of there, and it was in reach. Yeah. And it just went further and further out of reach with every kind of push I took. And I broke down on the side of a track. Like you're waiting there to go through a mix zone and go through media, and I couldn't hold it together. Like I'd done everything I possibly could that year to win a medal. I'd done everything right in terms of training, and I did everything me and my coach laid out in that race to get myself into the best position. And it just, on the day, there was quicker guys there, but it broke me. And it took me a long time to kind of process that. I'd be like, right, this has happened for a reason. I think off the back of that, I realized I needed a change of scenery, a change of training groups. And I moved myself into Scotland and trained up there. So before I was based in the kind of West Midlands, Coventry. Coventry was a big training base for me. And after that race, I was like, I need to change something. I moved everything up to Scotland, started going to uni there, so I had something outside the sport to kind of focus on. Yeah. And just kind of shifted where I wanted to be, because I felt like I needed to freshen up, because I couldn't go through that again. I couldn't go with being that close to winning a medal and not. And yeah, that was probably my big tipping point in a sporting sense, that I was like, right, I'm at my lowest now. I need to kind of rebuild and kind of pull myself back from it a little bit.
Yeah. And one of the things that I'm striving to do with this podcast is to find out how much support and help athletes are actually getting, within sport, or to help them with the mental side of things like this. I'm curious to know how much help were you given, or how much help were you given any help from the Paralympic sport world, Paralympic athletics, to help you kind of progress and move beyond that? Was there a support network there of psychologists or mental performance coaches to help you in some way?
So I think the staff at British Athletics, the psychology team, are amazing, and they helped me get through that, and they were the ones that helped push me to make the decision to kind of change something.
Yeah.
I didn't put myself in the situation. Whenever you go away to major competitions, they're amazing. Like, you can't fault them. And when you're on a funded program, a world-class program, and have all those resources at your fingertips, they're amazing. I think where I've noticed the difference is I lost my funding in 2018. So I dropped off the British Athletics World Class Performance Program in 2018 after winning European silvers.
Wow.
And it was then that was a little bit difficult, because you then have to go and find it a little bit more for yourself. But when you're on a world class performance program, or when you go to a major championships, you get all the support you could need. It's kind of more, if you're not on that funding pathway, not on that world class program, for whatever reason, that it can then be a bit difficult to find it.
Yeah.
I'm lucky in the sense that, having moved to Scotland when I did, I was able to access the Scottish Institute of Sport, and they have a really good kind of performance lifestyle team, psychology team up here. So
awesome.
It wasn't as bad of a transition as it probably could have been, but it was still a transition. You get used to a psychologist, you chat to them about everything, like your deepest, darkest secrets, you open up to them. And then to try and do that with someone else, it takes time.
Yeah.
It took me a little bit of time after I lost my funding in 2018 to be able to go, right, I need to be able to trust someone again the same way I trusted my psychologist at British Athletics.
Yeah.
But after the event in 2017, after the World Championships, I got all the help I needed to be able to go, right, what do I need to do to get me in the best place to kind of bounce back from this? Because at that point, we'd just come out of the Rio cycle, we were kind of coming halfway through to the Tokyo one. If I was going to make a change, that was the kind of golden window to be able to do it.
Yeah, that's great. That really sounds and feels like that. You've been able to get the support at key moments when you needed it, and all too often athletes don't quite get that when they need it. And the troughs kind of carry on a little bit too long. But do you think that a key part of the work that you did there with your sports psychologist was helping you to reframe the adversity, to so that you could look at it and say, right, how can I turn this around? How can I use that disappointment from having that world championship gold medal in your hand, to then losing your funding, etc. How can I take this and use it as fuel to kick me on? Would you say that was a big part of what you were doing to try to turn things around for yourself?
I think we sat down, it might have been a couple of weeks after, and we had a really frank discussion, and we were like, right, 100 meters to go, you're in a position to win a medal. Within 30, 40 meters after that, you're then finishing fifth at World Championships. Right, let's frame it. Fifth at World Championships is a bloody good result, but it's not what you wanted. So it's accepting the fact that it's going to feel shitty. And it's going to, the only way I can put it is, accept the fact that it's going to feel awful. Give yourself the time to feel awful about it, but don't wallow in it. Because it would have been very easy for me to go, oh, that was the worst thing, and just wallow in what went wrong, rather than going, right, I've had my time off, my week and a bit of whatever, right? It felt crap at the time, where what can I do next? And I think part of that is me as a person, that I want to do better. And I think part of it is the work that I did with the psychologist to be like, right, you did it. It was a good result. Like, it wasn't an awful result. You got there, you raced well. It just didn't happen on the day. Let yourself feel bad about it for what happened on the day, and then make sure it doesn't happen again. And try and get yourself in the best position. It was just working on different strategies and being able to make sure that I wasn't sitting there mulling things over at 11 o'clock at night when you can't sleep. And there was that kind of definite turn of a page kind of thing, rather than kind of sitting and kind of worrying that it might happen again.
Yeah. But when you look back now at that event, what do you think were, 2 or 3 key factors which caused you, to either fade away or the others go past you? Was it just that they were faster and stronger on that day, or were there other things that underpinned it? Was it just down to you not being physically fast enough, fit enough, strong enough, or do you think that there were other factors which also contributed towards that?
I think part of it was the fact that there was other guys quicker on the day, and some days that's just what happens. Like, you can't control it. I think there was a tactical element that I maybe should have done something slightly different. Like, hindsight's a great thing. You look at it and go, "Oh, I could have kicked then, or I could have done that." And those two kind of physical aspects of it are probably, they have a factor. But I think also part of it is I was extremely nervous sitting under that stadium. So you go into a call room before you race, and it's usually like 45 minutes before you race. You go into a room and you're sitting there with all the other guys you're racing against. You're all kind of eyeballing each other, trying to work out who's nervous and whatever else. And I think there's a bit of extra pressure with it being a kind of London Championships.
Yeah.
And there being 2 British athletes in that race and me being one of them. I think I put expectation on myself to do well. And I think I got nervous to a point where it probably affected my performance. And I probably didn't go into that kind of race in that kind of flow state, the kind of calm state you want to be in. Yeah. I went in probably a little bit, extremely nervous going into it, because I knew how much was riding on it. And I think that probably had a knock-on effect to the other factors. Because when you're nervous, you don't think as straight as you would do in normal events. And the thing is, I raced these guys numerous times throughout the year, and I beat them. So it's not the fact that I thought I couldn't do it. It's the fact that, it's a world championship final, it's in front of a home crowd, my mum and my family are up in the stands somewhere watching. And there's that kind of like nervous energy that kind of comes with it. It got too much, and I don't think I handled that in the best way at the time. Yeah,
you've hit a lot of things which I often helping athletes dealing with. It was that sense of overwhelm at time, and that self-talk. I think, for any athletes listening to this, one of the things that all athletes and all of us just generally in day-to-day life need to understand is the power of words, and especially your own internal self-talk, because there are 2 key factors which drive the state. And by state, I mean your emotional, physiological state. And one of those is your self-talk, the words that you're using, the words that you're choosing to talk about to represent what it is that you're seeing in that moment and experiencing that moment. Obviously, the tonality of how you're saying those words, and then also for what images you're creating in those moments. As soon as people start saying, well, what if I let my mum and dad down? Then, quite often a picture of the parents will, flag up, what if I'm just not fit enough? What if this, what if that? And those words combined with any potential pictures which come up, ultimately then, creates this neurophysiological state. And no athlete will ever perform to their truest potential if they're not in a peak state. And as soon as nerves comes on, those what if questions is driving anxiety, which is turning on the freeze, fight or flight mechanism, which then it almost, if there was a wire, it almost cuts off the wire between where all of your skills, all your performances that you have ingrained in your mind are at the back in the cerebellum. But when you get nervous, that prefrontal cortex flicks on and starts thinking about danger, because that's all, the fear of losing something at a much deeper level. So subconsciously, it's a fear of A, not being good enough, or B, losing out on something. And that is enough to take you, as you said, out of that flow state. And Have you, from that moment now, have you kind of developed kind of techniques to help you stop those thought processes? Are there things that you do now to help you prepare mentally, emotionally, to deal with those situations better?
Yeah, I think with me, it was a case of, in that race in 2017, I tried to pretend that I wasn't nervous and try and like make the nerves a bad thing and try and shut them out too much. So I was like overly listening to music before I went in, or I was like overly not looking at someone because I was nervous about looking nervous, if that makes sense, and kind of giving it away. Whereas I think now it's much more a case of normalizing the fact that you're nervous. There's not many occasions where you're going to be on a world stage like that and be like, okay, this is showtime. There's not many jobs in the world that have that kind of pressure on them at less than 2 minutes into a race, or like 2 minutes into a job. Like, it's a lot of pressure to put on someone, and it's about being like, right, I'm allowed to feel nervous. Like, it's a strange situation to be in, and to kind of just accept it and ride with it a little bit, rather than try and think of it as a bad thing. Thinking was like, right, I'm in a really lucky position to be able to feel nervous about this. Don't stress by the fact that you're nervous. Like, just use it. And it's still something that I'm not amazing at. Like Tokyo, my 800 meter heat, I was just as nervous, and I held it together really well. My final in Tokyo, probably I went too far the other way. Like, I hadn't got that nailed down. But it's something that I need to work on, and I want to kind of continue to work on. But it's a constant battle, because it's like an untamable beast a wee bit. It's like, how do you say, oh, it's okay to be nervous when you're feeling nervous enough to stress about it? It's kind of a catch-22, but that's the kind of strategy that I try and work on, is just trying to normalize everything.
Yeah.
And then worry about it after the fact.
Yeah, I think one of the phrases that I like to use, and you kind of touched on it really, is feel the feeling until it goes away. Trying to say something, you're not this, when you are. It can fan the flame even bigger, because nerves are there. I spent a lot of time studying anthropology, looking back, how we evolved from what we were when we were these more like chimp-like, caveman-like people. And once upon a time, we couldn't converse like that. We couldn't communicate through words because language wasn't there. But the mind needed to alert the body to danger if there was a saber-toothed tiger there. And the way that it did that was through feeling. It wouldn't be a voice inside the caveman or woman's head saying, get the hell out of here, there's a saber-tooth that's going to kill you. It's this feeling that the freeze, fight or flight mechanism comes on, it kicks in, the amygdala, sends the messages down to the adrenal glands, and it's then showtime. You've either got to fight or flight, or even freeze, which is, where you really don't want to be. And getting control over that and listening to the what that subconscious mind is saying. It's trying to alert you to something that you or it has perceived as some kind of potential threat, whether that is a real threat or not. Whether it's a saber-toothed tiger or it's the threat of losing a race, it becomes kind of a threat to almost like the identity. What if I lose this race and I'm not as good as what I thought I was? What if I lose this race and people don't think I'm that good, or my funding gets cut, or this, that, and the other? But you should also listen to it. Listen to the feeling. What is this feeling trying to tell me? What is it trying to alert me to? And then if you can get in tune with that, then you can start to break it down. Well, what if this feeling isn't real? What if this imagined scenario that I'm playing out in my mind about not being good enough, or whatever it is that somebody might be saying, just questioning it, feel the feeling, and then question whatever's kind of coming back from that, to try to break that pattern, because that's all it is. It's a neurological pattern of thinking and feeling and thinking and feeling, and the more you think a thought, the more you generate the feeling. So as you said, it becomes this cycle, but avoiding it doesn't, burying it away doesn't solve the issue, does it?
No, and that's exactly right. For me, I try and normalize it now, and it doesn't always work. Like, I can get nervous at a really small domestic meet the exact same way as I would do in a Paralympic Games. It's just some days it's great, and some days I deal with it well, and some days it's not. And it's just about trying to find what works. And I think that's going to be a constant trial and error throughout the rest of my athletics career. It's not something that I'm going to nail down. I think when I get it right, I'll be like, right, what did I get right here? And when it goes bad, I think I just need to kind of reflect on what I didn't do as well. I think as an athlete, you always kind of focus on what you did badly rather than what you did well, which is probably something I need to work on a little bit more in terms of how to deal with pressure and how to deal with nerves and things. And, oh, right, I handled that really well. Why did I handle it really well? Instead of just glossing over it and go, oh, I did all right today, and then kind of focusing more on the negative side. It's something that I'm always going to have to kind of work on.
Yeah, and again, it's so important, one, to acknowledge that you have done, and for anyone else listening and watching, and the mind has this nasty habit of focusing on the negative, and it's because the avoidance of pain. The mind is constantly trying to assess: is this going to bring me pleasure, or is it going to bring me pain? And by focusing on the negative, it increases the chances of avoiding the pain. Don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. I didn't do that well, I didn't do that well, I didn't do that well. And we need that. We need, if we didn't learn that sticking our hand into a fire as a kid brought us pain, we'd keep doing it. But the key is I'll pass it on to you at the end. You may find it useful. There's a book written by a guy, and I've forgotten the details and his name. And he created this concept of the 80-20 rule. And I apply that rule with pleasure and pain. You can use pain, yeah, and you can use it to drive you to go on to do amazing things. But keep that pain to be that kind of weapon for only 20% of the time. Because if people keep using pain to drive them towards things, you're using adrenaline, you're using the fight or flight mechanism. There's only so long you're going to be able to do that. No matter what creature on the planet it can only run and with all that adrenaline energy for so long. Ultimately, we all, in whatever aspects of our lives, we need to find the pleasure in what we're doing and focusing on the positive. What do I want to see? How do I want to feel? How do I want to race this race today? How do I want to play this game of netball? How do I want to move on the court today? What patterns of movements do I want to display? What skills do I want to show? How do I want to talk to my teammates when I'm playing this game of rugby? Rather than, I don't want anybody to say this to me. I don't want to drop the ball. I don't want to false start in this race. And by focusing on that negative, that potential pain, it only brings it into the mind, if that makes sense, because the brain, it can't do a don't. To not think about something subconsciously, the mind has to go, well, what does it mean to not do whatever it is? To not drop a rugby ball subconsciously, the mind has to figure out what not dropping a ball is. And then that increases your chance of dropping the ball, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So a lot of the work that I do with athletes is in that simple scenario there, for example, is, every single time, when that ball's either with a player or it's coming out of back of a scrum, my hands are up. They're ready. This ball is going to stick like super glue into my hands, and they're going to be up as a target. And my eyes are like a razor-like assassin, focusing on that, keeping the mind on the positive. And for anybody listening, as I said, try and follow this 80-20 rule. Use those kind of, if you like, some people call them the darker emotions. I've heard Kobe Bryant talk about this, how he would use, his failures, his injuries, the things that went wrong to drive him, like you did there, Ben, where things didn't go right in that race. You took the pain of defeat, of not getting what you wanted, and then it's like, right, I'm making a change here. This is going to become the moment where it flips on its head for me. You took the pain and used it to channel your circumstances to then try to do something different to then get what you want, constantly being driven by, if I make this change now, if I use this painful memory of not achieving what I wanted to, it will lead me to feeling so great when I get this target and goal that I want. And I think, as I say, for anybody listening, whether it's in sport or outside of sport, these are the key things. And I remember when I was doing a lot of the research on athletes, 20 years ago, and reading through all the autobiographies, I was so kind of surprised really about all of the things that would go wrong for all these athletes.
Yeah.
And as a younger kid, teenage lad wanting to make it into the world of sport and not being able to do that myself. There's a partner that thought that they just didn't have those issues, that they was kind of just born this way, where they was able to just kind of transcend that and not go through it. And there wasn't any autobiography, and there hasn't been any elite athlete that I've come across where things haven't gone wrong. And the difference is that how they then evolved and changed after that, that's the key, or one of the keys anyway.
Yeah, and I think the difference between a kind of elite end athlete and probably a kind of really good club athlete is being able to process that, and being able to process not just the stuff that goes wrong when you're performing, or injuries and the kind of physical side of it like that. A lot of times you feel crap because the amount of stuff you're having to give up to be able to do what you want to do. I know I've been in situations where I've had to choose between going on a training camp and going to my granddad's funeral. And being able to put yourself in that situation and being like, right, I know this is going to be shit and it's going to hurt, but I need to do what I need to do to be able to get to where I want to be. And there was a situation, I was out training in Australia, and we were out there for a holding camp or a training camp meeting. And my granddad died when I was out there, and I knew there was a chance of it happening. But yeah, it happened when I was out there, and I got given a choice between staying out and training or flying back. And it was that kind of process of flying back's not going to do me any good. Like, I know where I need to be right now, and it's not there. It's where I was, and kind of to focus on what I needed to do. That was 2015, so it was just before Rio. I know I wanted to get selected for my first Paralympic Games. I knew my granddad wanted me to get selected for my first Paralympic Games. So I knew where I needed to be. And it was a case of being able to process that. So it's not just kind of adversity in the physical sense of, I had a crap race, or I've hurt my shoulder, I'm injured. It's like the unseen stuff that I don't think a lot of people understand. And it's the kind of, you reach an age where if you're giving up going to kind of family events and stuff like that, that's one thing. But when you lose in touch with friends at school because they're all going out partying and you're sitting inside training or getting an early night, and you lose touch with people that you thought you were really close to, it's been to overcome that adversity as much as it is the kind of physical side of it that puts a massive mental strain on, especially young athletes, because I think there's this expectation that you're supposed to be able to juggle everything, and you just can't. And sometimes it's really tough decisions on what to do. And I think that's where a lot of very, very good athletes probably lose their track a little bit. And it's where there's a lot of strain being put on kind of elite athletes that come into sport very young.
Yeah, what you said there, Ben, I find that really powerful and absolutely amazing advice for anybody, younger athletes, older athletes, because it's one of the questions I was actually going to bring up a little bit later down the line about values, and conflicts with values, things that are bashing up against, you want to become this athlete and achieve these things, and any other conflicting like values and things which can leave you torn at times. And you're just given like an unbelievably powerful example there of having to make a decision between essentially achieving your dreams and going to your granddad's funeral there, and you knew for yourself that the right thing to do was stick at it, you know. And I'm sure.
So I think it's even harder than that, because it's not a case of you're definitely going to achieve your dreams. It's I might, or this might put me in a slightly better place to be able to do it. Like, nothing's confirmed with a Paralympic Games selection until like 3-4 weeks beforehand, when you get a phone call. So you're waiting right until the last minute for a phone call that could go one or two ways. So you put your life on hold for 4 years on a maybe, and you give up so much personal stuff for a maybe. But it's the chance of that maybe being the best thing in the world that is often quite hard to kind of put across to people, that you don't always know that you're going to go to a major championships. Very, very few of the kind of Paralympic athletes know that they guarantee the space on a team. So to be able to put life on hold and to have those kind of conflicts between social life and training and going through that when you're kind of a young adult or a teenager is even harder, because you've got all these social kind of norms that you'd be expected to kind of go through that you just don't as an athlete. But to put all those on hold for a maybe is always quite a hard thing to be able to kind of process and kind of vocalize a little bit.
Yeah. And how have you got to the point where you're able to keep it certainly comes across this way anyway, that, correct me if I'm wrong, that you're able to consistently keep what you're doing as an athlete as the highest priority in your life, you know, at the expense of other things? You know, are there any particular, you know, how have you got to this point where you can say, you know, I'm gonna, you know, 90% of the time, let's say, I'm going to say no to these such social things, you know, my granddad's funeral, things like this. Is there anything that you have done to help you be able to get so clear on what you feel that you need to do?
I think part of it for me is me as a person. I knew that I wanted to be a Paralympian. I knew I wanted to go to Paralympic Games. I knew I wanted to win medals. So especially when I was younger and kind of coming through, that was a very kind of blinkered on driven focus for it. And then as you get older, your kind of priorities do shift a little bit. And it's all about having the kind of support network around you to be able to balance those. I was very lucky that my family have always been really supportive of me. They've always been there to give me advice when I need it. A lot of my friends are exactly the same as me in terms of they're very driven. In whatever field they're in, they're very, very driven, and they know what they want and they know how to go about to get it. Whether that's my school friends, some of them play rugby at a very high level, or they're very kind of arty and that side of it. They know what they want to do and they know how to get it. So I've always had a really strong support network with that. And I think as of like the last kind of 4 or 5 years since I moved to Scotland, my girlfriend's been a kind of really big sounding board for me when I've been like, things are getting a little bit too much with training, or things are getting a little bit too much with like uni dissertations, trying to balance training full time and writing a uni dissertation. Like it's a hard juggling act to try and do. But I had that strong support network to kind of pump me up when I needed a bit of kind of inflating a little bit. So when I needed a kind of pick me up, they were there. And when I need to kick up the arse and bring it down a peg or two, they're also there. So I think without them, I probably would have really, really struggled to kind of get that balance. Because I think you can either go one or two ways. You can either go like fully into sport and close yourself off completely and you lose touch with everyone, or you go the other way and you say yes to everything and then your sport suffers. I think being able to have like a sounding board, whether it's my family at home or whether it's my girlfriend or my friends just in general, like being able to go to them and be like, right, what do you think? Or them to tell me when I'm being a bit of a crap, like that helps me, because it helps me keep everything in line rather than being like a constant pull between like, oh, I need to go and do this for a sport basis or I need to go do this for personal stuff. They kind of help me find that balance rather than being kind of solely on me.
I've definitely come across over the years with athletes that I've worked with where they haven't had this environment, if you like, that you seem to have like around you, you know, that this support network. And it's something that I've always been aware of, that if a young athlete especially doesn't have that environment, and by environment I mean the people around them to be able to talk to be able to give them advice, to help them deal with the challenges and pressures, and even to just listen to about the problems that they're struggling with. When that's not there for the athlete, especially with younger children that I've worked with, that's all, really plays a key factor in whether or not the athlete goes on to make it or not, because they've got all this talent and ability, but they need that stability around them to help them, because they're dealing with things that other 16, 15, 14, 16, 17, 18-year-olds just aren't dealing with. It's as a young child, it's like having a job, essentially. It's having a job as a teenager. And what's all the other teenagers doing? Watching TV, playing on Xboxes, messing around on social media, hanging around with the mates. They're not dealing with the pressure, the expectation, a lot of children, earlier on in their life don't even have like targets to aim for, and so they've got to grow up so quickly, to make it into the world of sport. And if there isn't, that environment, that and the people, or even just a person, it could just be one person, that is giving, the advice to help them keep them on the straight and narrow when they're thinking about wavering off, or when they're thinking about quitting. Somebody there to just, help advise them, help just give them a piece of advice that just, encourages them to stick with it and change some things. And it certainly seems like this has been, very beneficial for you in helping get to you to where you are and keep progressing. But
yeah, I mean, I'm the first one to admit I'm not the most talented racer in the world. I'm not the most technical racer in the world. I'm not by any means the most gifted athlete out there. There's people out there that are far more kind of athletically gifted, have better attributes for the sport and everything else. But I think one thing that I do have is that close support networks that keep me kind of fully focused in on what I need to do. And that helps me kind of be as consistent as I am with training, as kind of focused as I am with that, so I can make the most out of the attributes I've got. Because I'm not, my kind of build, I'm 5'8" and I've got short arms. Like, I'm not perfect for wheelchair racing. I'm not long and rangy. I'm just not kind of perfectly built for the sport. But I make do with what I've got, and I make the best out of what I've got, because I've got a really strong support network around me. They've led me to get into situations where I can maximize what I'm doing in the gym, what I'm doing in physio, what I'm doing in the chair, to kind of make the most out of the talent that I do have. And without them, I know I wouldn't be where I am today.
I'm not sure how easily you'll be able to answer this, but if there's somebody listening and watching this who, especially as a younger athlete, who doesn't have that support, they're doing this on their own, do you have any words of wisdom, piece of advice that you think that you could give to somebody like this who doesn't have these people to go to help them, which may help them, keep on the straight and narrow and achieve what they want to achieve?
I think if you're a young athlete and say you've got school friends and family, if they're not supporting you in the way that you feel you need to in sport, then create a sporting family that do. Like, there's coaches, there's training partners, there's everyone else who are then pulling in the same direction, and they can become your kind of sporting family, and they can keep you grounded with that. It doesn't just have to be the people that are immediately close to you because they're the people you live with or they're the people you go to school with. You can have like a racing family or a kind of sporting family that support you, and I don't mean that in the sense of that they'll kind of put a roof over your head and stuff, but they'll guide you in the sense of what you need to do as an athlete to be as the best as you can be. And whether that's a very good coach, whether that's a very good training group, whether that's just someone you get on with that you're kind of at a club with, kind of use that relationship as much as you can to get the most out of it. Use them as a sounding board if you have questions to ask, and kind of work together. Like, some of my best friends on the athletics team have achieved a lot more than I have in terms of winning medals and everything else. So I know that if I have a question, I can go and ask them, and I'm going to get an honest answer. And being able to have that support network within a sport is like just another layer on top of my personal cake of my support network around me. So I think if you've not got that support network at home of kind of friends or family that are kind of wanting to do everything that you need to as an athlete to be successful, make your own one within a sporting framework.
That's yeah, I had no idea where you was going to go with that then, but I just think that's such amazing advice. There's a quote which came to my mind as you were saying that from I don't know if you know him, a guy called Tony Robbins.
No, I don't.
When you'll like, and if you listen to, he's really big in terms of the personal development world. But one of his quotes is who you associate with is who you become. And if you're in an environment which deep down you know you're not quite getting the support or help or advice that you need, then you'll start picking up some of their traits. So you're gonna, where you can, create, as you said, your own environment. Go and find the people who are in your sport, in your club, whatever, who are trying to do the same thing, and bounce off each other, and use that as, like, as you said, your sounding board, the place where you go to motivate you to even, maybe that can become the place where you go to where you're struggling a little bit, if you've got no one to go to, and just sort of say, even if it's injury related or other things. So yeah, I think that's fantastic advice. And I think just thinking about it myself now, if there really is no one in their immediate family, then go to books, go read about athletes, their journeys, how, their story. There's a story behind all of us, everyone, and there's certainly a story behind these athletes who go on to achieve these great things like yourself. And there are words of wisdom in books, there are interviews, online. YouTube is a great place to go find out more about how athletes have got through those moments in life. How, in terms of mental and physical, then, in your opinion, Ben, what percent of performing at the highest level that you are, and achieving the things that you're trying to achieve, what percent of being able to do this is mental, and what percent is physical to you? If you could try and put that into a percentage, I'd really appreciate that.
That's quite a different, I guess it's different for each athlete in each individual sport. I think for me, it's probably 60-40 in terms of 60% of it be physical. Like, you have to do the training, you have to do the work to be kind of physically prepared to be able to do what you need to do. But then I think 40% of it is mental, because without the right kind of bit of grey matter above your head, you're not going to be able to put what you've done in training into practice when it matters. So it's not quite 50-50, because I think a very gifted physical athlete could pull something out on the day and kind of not have that mental support or that kind of fortitude about him. But I think a large part of it, especially in professional sport now, is mental, and there's a lot of work gone into that. So I think it's probably, for me, a 60-40 split.
Brilliant. What advice? Imagine you've, not quite sure how old you are, Ben, but you've accumulated all these years of experience. You've got all these memories. You've had the highs and lows of sport, the highs and lows of life, and you are where you are now. Imagine that you could travel back in time to any point in your kind of younger life and give this younger you some advice that would then help them do things going forwards in a better way. have you got what piece of advice would you go back and say to your younger self?
So I'm 25, so I'm not like ancient yet. I've still got a few years left in me, but I'm not sure I would say anything because I'm not sure younger me would listen. I think I was very headstrong when I was a kid, so I think I had to find my own way in it. I don't think I'd have taken it on board properly when I was a kid. So I think I'd quite like just to leave me to it, because the only way you ever learn is by kind of making mistakes and messing things up. Yeah. So if I go and say, here's the recipe to win everything, right, you can give him it, but if he doesn't listen to it and doesn't take it on board, it's kind of pointless anyway.
Yeah.
So I think the mistakes I've made for a reason, and I've learned from it. I wouldn't want to change it or take it away, because it would then change who I am now going into hopefully what will be my third Paralympic Games in Paris. So I wouldn't want to change anything, because I've made the mistakes I have for a reason. So, and I know me as a kid wouldn't have taken a blind bit of notice. I would have just been like, yeah, whatever.
That's a great answer, Ben, and I think what that also demonstrates is just how well you've been able to use the events, you know, that have happened to spur you on to as fuel for that fire to keep growing and keep learning, keep developing, keep striving to become the greatest version of yourself that you can become. And that's a great answer, that, Ben. What is your number one superpower? You've obviously got lots of great gifts. These could be mental, they could be physical, they could be tactical. What's the one thing that you do which has helped you get to achieving the sporting excellence that you have done? As I say, it could be skill, tactical, technical, could be a habit, could be beliefs or traits. What's perhaps one thing which is your superpower, which you know is really driving you towards where you've got to today?
That's a really hard question, because I don't really think I've got one. Like, I think for me, I always try and be really consistent in whatever I do. I think that might be it. Like, I'm consistent in the sense of what I do in a training week is very kind of stable. What I do going into a race now is very stable compared to what it was. But in terms of like a superpower, I don't do anything that anyone else doesn't do. I probably just kind of, I'm a bit more consistent than maybe I have been previously. I hate being late to things in terms of like being punctual to like a gym session and stuff, or a training session. I like to be there with plenty of time. I like having my routines and stuff like that. But I wouldn't say, like, I'm not one enough to say I've got a superpower yet, because I'm not done what I wanted to do. I think ask me that after I win a Paralympic medal, and I might be able to answer it a bit better. But I think because I'm not done what I wanted to do yet, I wouldn't say I've got a superpower. I'd just say I just try and make the most out of what I've got.
Yeah, that's another great answer then, I think. But as you're saying, though, consistency, you know, in anything in life is key. Without that, and everybody has, their ups and downs. Everybody needs to give themselves that flexibility of, an off day, a time when you don't quite stick to something, but being consistent over time. When you look at athletes who go on to achieve great things, a big part of what they do, which gets them there, is consistency in turning up every day and training in a certain way consistently, motivating themselves to do the things that others aren't willing to do, consistently being able to turn on those great performances when the moments required them. So, I think vast majority of athletes, consistency, if they could find consistency, would be something that would bring them a lot of kind of happiness, because for some people they can't quite find it for one reason or another. So definitely think having consistency in your arsenal of weapons, Ben, is going to help you get to where you want to go, mate.
Yeah, I'm also like stubborn. Like, it's a really stupid personality trait, but I don't like being told no. Like, if someone tells me I can't go and do something, I'll try and find a way to go and do it. So yeah, maybe stubborn might be one. In good and bad senses, I'm sure my friends and family tell me that there's a stubborn side to me that's not so good, but I think in terms of it kind of goes over quite well.
When you look back over what you've achieved so far, Ben, how do you feel about it from where you were, where you once were when you knocked on the door of your PE teacher at school and you said, ultimately I want to make something of myself in sport. When you look back from there to where you are now, how do you feel about it at the moment?
I think this goes back to the conversation of like perspective and kind of where you look at it in the moment and where you look at it in the past.
Yeah.
Ask me in 20 years' time when I'm retired, and I'll look back and go, I had a great career.
Yeah.
Where it doesn't feel like I'm anywhere near done. I've not done what I wanted to yet.
Yeah.
So it feels like I've done a lot of stepping stones to try and get to where I want to be. It doesn't feel like I've reached anything yet. Like saying all the things I've done, like achievement wise, it's great, but it's not what I want yet. It's not that end goal. So at the moment, it feels like I'm kind of part way on a journey that's not quite finished yet.
Yeah.
So it's hard to look at it. Like I wouldn't say I've been successful yet because I've not done what I wanted to do. That might change when I look back on it, but I'd say right now I don't feel content with where I'm at. I wouldn't be working as hard as I am at the moment to be able to get to another Paralympic Games for the chance to win a medal if I was happy with where I was at. So I think for me, it's all about kind of right. I've done some good things, done some okay things, done some really crap things along my way, but I'm not finished yet, not by a long way. So I've still got a lot I still want to achieve. So yeah, to be continued, I think.
Awesome. That makes complete sense. So the last two questions, Ben, and this next one just follows on for that. Then, what is left for you? What are your targets that you've set yourself so that when you are done in another however many years that may be, what is it that you want to be able to say that you've done to make you feel like you've achieved your potential and dreams?
So I want to win a Paralympic medal. At some point in my career, that's what I want to do. I think I'm capable of doing it. I'm more than capable of doing it. It's just about doing it on the day. So I think winning a Paralympic medal is one. I want to do another couple of Paralympic Games. Me personally, I said LA would be a kind of good one to aim for. Eventually, so that's in 2 games time, so Paris and then LA's after that.
Yeah.
Girlfriend said that when she heard Queensland come out, she quite fancied a trip to Australia. So that might be negotiated close to the time. But yeah, I want to go do a couple more Paralympic Games. I want to win medals. I want to be the best in the world. And I want to enjoy what I'm doing. Like the moment I stop enjoying racing and it becomes a chore, or like the training becomes a chore and you don't want to do it, that's when I'll pack it in, regardless of where I'm at. Because you can only get yourself up at 6 a.m. to go to the gym or out in the cold in the rain and push for miles and miles if you enjoy it. The moment you stop enjoying that, you're just not going to go and do the extra little bits that you need to go and do. So I think that's, long term, a couple more Paralympic Games, win medals, but that all depends on kind of whether I'm still enjoying it.
Awesome. And I think I know what you just said there about the enjoyment factor. If that goes from an athlete, that whole pleasure and pain, it's going to be pain in doing what you're doing. You're going to have those days where there's a part of you that's, I don't want to do this today, But again, they need to be kept to that minimum. When you're driven by pleasure, the pursuit of achieving what you want, what you believe you're capable of, when athletes are able to keep that in check so that they're getting more pleasure from doing what they're doing as opposed to the pain, it's so important for anybody doing anything, but obviously very important with athletes. And often what happens, with athletes that have a blip is that it's started to become a bit unbalanced, that there's too many things going wrong. They lose that love for the sport for whatever reason, a few too many bad performances or coaches not believing in them or injuries, you know, things like that. And those painful memories and incidences kind of stack up and flip that seesaw in the other way. I think again it's another fantastic piece of advice from you there, Ben. It just as they say about gambling, when the fun stops, stop, but just make sure that you don't have any regrets for anybody that is thinking about stopping because they're not quite sure of how to deal with whatever it is that has happened. And sometimes it's, as we spoke about numerous times today, just seeking that help or advice to help you reframe your mind into the positive. Yeah. There's plenty of people that have come back from things that have gone wrong, injuries, being told, no, you're not good enough. And if they had stopped there, it would have, the world would have never seen these amazing stories.
I think with me, I'm quite open with the fact that I've struggled mentally. I've struggled with mental health surrounding races. I've fallen out of love with the sport before. Like, it's when things are low in professional sport, they're really low. And I have struggled with it. And those thoughts do go through your head of, do I want to do this anymore? Do I want to keep giving up everything, giving up your life, putting everything on hold to go around in circles, basically? And I've had those demons and I've had those doubts, and I probably will continue to have them at points. Like, everything's not going to be an upward curve. There's going to be points where I'm going to be like, right, is this what I want? And I think at the moment it is. I've got a really strong support network around me, but I think I want to reiterate that it's normal to have those thoughts. It's when it becomes more than a single thought or more than a short period that I'll then start to question it. Yeah. And I think because whenever I felt it, it's always been after a crap race. So I know that it's not a long thing. It's not after a really good session. I was like, oh, it's really good, but I'm not really feeling it. Like, I know it's because of the outcome on about the process. When I stop enjoying the process, I'll stop completely. But at the moment, I'm loving it. I'm really enjoying training at the moment. So I'm not thinking about it, but because I know I've had those demons before and I've had those doubts and I've had the kind of mental health struggles that come with performance sport, I know what the triggers are that when things are going to be bad, like when I know I'm going to stop, I know what to kind of look out for, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Complete sense. My last question for you then, Ben. What's your definition or meaning of excellence or sporting excellence? What's sporting excellence to you?
To me, it's getting everything you can out of the tools that you've got. Like, everyone's sporting excellence is going to be slightly different. Like, you look at Michael Jordan, his sporting excellence was so far and above anyone that's ever come before him, or anyone that's ever gone since. But your sporting excellence could be if you do a swim once a week and that goes up to twice a week. Like, your small little gains in training, like your 1%, are what make it sporting excellence. And that varies from person to person. Like, there's not a kind of gold standard of, oh, you have to be a professional athlete or you have to go to Olympic Games to be seen as excellent in sport. Like, your excellent in sport could be you've really, really struggled to do something and you've worked out a way of doing it. To me, that's sporting excellence. It's a more personal thing than maybe it kind of comes across at times. Because I think you see athletes, and we put athletes on a pedestal, and everyone looks up to them and be like, oh, they're amazing at sport. They do all of this. That's what sporting excellence is. Well, actually, you've got a guy at your local gym that's getting a PB by 2K on a bench press. That's sporting excellence to him. That's what, like, he works that block, that month, that 6 weeks, whatever it is for, to make that performance excellent. So for me, it's about, like, everyone getting the most out of what they've got. It's not about kind of material things.
Yeah, that's a great answer, that, Ben. And I hope anybody, as I said, watching and listening to this, takes that. If we get stuck in the comparison game, myself versus somebody else, there's always going to be somebody better than you. Whether you could be the best in the world for a long time at something, but somebody's going to come along and do it better than you. You know, age will catch up at some point, if it's that. And it's, yeah, as you say, it's about making the most and being honest with yourself as well, I guess. You know, what do I want to achieve, and what am I capable of, and then going for that. So I think that's absolutely amazing advice, and I think that's a fantastic way to wrap this up, Ben. And I just would like to, first of all, thank you for giving up your time for coming on the show and giving all these words of wisdom and being so honest about the things that you struggle with over the years. And I think you've really give a fantastic insight to the peaks and troughs, the highs and lows of being an athlete and the inner game, as I call it. It's as you said, it's often feels like a battle between various different things colliding, and you've certainly had some experiences that you've been able to flip and learn from to kind of catapult you onto the next level, and hopefully that catapult is sending you straight towards Paris and finishing with at least a medal around your neck, Ben.
I hope so. Thank you. Yeah, I just want to help people. So if I can help one person get into sport or fall back in love with sport, that's what I want to do. I want to try and give back a little bit. So if anyone ever needs a bit of advice, I'm sure you'll link it all to my social media. And if anyone wants to get in touch, I've got a website, so just search Ben Rowlings into Google and that'll come up, and I'm more than happy to help in any way I can.
Awesome, thank you. And I'll make sure I put those links under the podcast so they can find those as well. So thanks again, Ben. I really appreciate you coming on. It's been really fantastic chatting with you and getting to know more about you and your story. So take it easy, my friend. Thanks a lot.
Take care.
The Inner Game Podcast, brought to you by the Science of Excellence. Unleash your power. Book your free consultation now.